This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Hey friends! Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, I'm Jenna. I love to crochet plushies, and if you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. For today's video, we are doing the highly requested how to design your very own crochet patterns. I'm super excited to finally be filming this for you guys. I get so many questions on pattern design, where to start, what software to use, etc. So hopefully I will cover all of that in this video for you guys, and it will be a super beginner-friendly guide to pattern designing. I will preface and say that I am not, a professional. I have been doing this now for a year, so I'm just going to offer all of my personal advice to you guys, but definitely take everything that I'm saying with a grain of salt, and if you prefer to do it a different way or method, that's totally fine. But okay, for the structure of this video, I thought it would be nice to break it out into a few different sections. Section 1 will cover all of the basic crochet stitches that I think is really important for you to understand in order to design a pattern and get it exactly how you want it. Section 2 will cover actually writing the pattern, and I will take you guys step by step on creating a pattern together. Section 3 will cover actually writing out the pattern and documenting it. And then lastly, for section 4, this will include pattern testing, revising your pattern, and finalizing it and getting it out there. So with that, let's jump into the video. Section 1, the basic stitches of pattern design. So I wrote everything out on my iPad, so I'm gonna have it here with me in case you see me looking down. So for this section, I think it's important to talk about all of the basic crochet stitches and what exactly they do to your work, so we will be able to use them efficiently and use them to shape the pattern exactly how we want it. Since this is a beginner's guide, I'm not gonna go into all of the stitches. We're just gonna cover the basics that you'll be needing. So let's start out with the single crochet. This is probably the most basic stitch with crochet. You'll be using this the majority of the time in a pattern. It essentially just adds depth to your plushie. So for example, if we had a pattern that called for 6 single crochet in a magic ring, so you have a small circle, and then we do 6 single crochet around for multiple rounds, we would essentially just make that circle increase in depth. It wouldn't necessarily change the width or anything like that. So single crochet is definitely important if we want to try and add depth to our plushie. So next we have the increase stitch. This stitch will essentially increase the width. So I forgot to mention, but this video guide is meant for amigurumi patterns. So in most cases, we'll be creating a magic ring, and that will essentially create a circle, and from there we'll go increase, decrease, etc. So with the increase stitch, this will help increase the width of our circle. The amount of increases that you place into each round of your pattern will ultimately determine how much bigger your circle will get. So for example, a lot of simple crochet patterns for amigurumi start out with 6 single crochet into a magic ring, and then almost always the next step is to increase into every one of those 6 stitches. So we'll be doubling the size of our circle from 6 stitches to 12 stitches. And then from there, usually the increases get more staggered because we don't want to be doubling the size of our circle. Instead, we want to be incrementally increasing the size. So that's where you see a lot of patterns that say like 1 single crochet and then place an increase stitch, and then we'll repeat that sequence X amount of times. That helps increase the size of our circle proportionally, and we're not going straight from like 6 to 12 to 24, etc. Okay, next we have the decrease stitch, and this is very similar to the increase, except it's doing the exact opposite. We will be decreasing the width of our circle. So a lot of times in crochet patterns for amigurumi, we use decreases to start closing up our plushie, to start ending the pattern, because we will eventually want to decrease all the way back down to a very small amount of stitches, so then we can close the plushie up. So both increases and decreases are essential if we are trying to make a 3D, circle, oval, and that's usually the case for like making a head, an arm, a leg, a body. So it decreases, the same rationale applies. We don't want to be decreasing in every single stitch unless you want to significantly get your circle to be smaller. So usually decreases are also staggered throughout, so you do like 1 single crochet decrease, and then repeat that sequence X amount of times. And then at the very end, usually one of the last rounds for like almost all of the amigurumi crochet patterns is to do like 6 decreases or 12 decreases, however many decreases you need to really just get that circle small enough for you to sew it up and close it shut. And then lastly, we have our basic, I'm gonna be calling them like specialty stitches. So instead of a single crochet, you could do a half double crochet, a double crochet, or a triple crochet. And basically what these stitches do, it increases the height of your actual stitch. I'll be placing a picture here. I found this really helpful graphic from Crochet by Carolyn. And this is a really good graphic because it shows you the difference in height for each of these different stitches. And I'm gonna look at the picture on my iPad here, but I'll also include it here. But for example, like as you can see, the single crochet is the smallest in terms of height for the stitches. Next, you have half double crochet. It is slightly taller than single crochet. Next, you have double crochet, and that's almost like half as tall as the single crochet. And then lastly, you have triple crochet, and that's the tallest stitch. Now, using a combination of single crochet, double crochet, triple, half double, this will allow you to stagger the height of your stitches. And this usually translates really well if you're trying to make like a snout or something that has like a varying height versus just the regular height of the single crochet. For those of you who are familiar with my channel and have seen some of my work in the past, I make my jumbo sunflower turtles a lot, and everyone always asks, how do you make the sunflower petals? And if you look at the pattern, it is really just a combination of half double crochet, triple crochet, double crochet, because putting all those stitches together with different heights will allow you to form something like a triangle that in turn looks like a petal of a flower. So when you think about pattern designing, you always want to keep it in the back of your mind, like what each of these stitches does to the work specifically. Will it make it bigger? Will it make it taller? Will it make it wider? And then from there, you can figure out the best combination of those stitches to result in the pattern that you have envisioned. I know I just said a lot. Hopefully it all makes sense once we go into the next section, and that's where we're kind of going to be playing around with all the different combinations of these stitches to come up with our very own pattern together. Okay, so section 2, let's design our very own pattern together. So the first step that I do for designing a new pattern is to go sketch out my initial design. I like to use my iPad, but you could also just draw it out on paper with a pencil. And then if you're using an iPad just like myself, I love using the app Procreate. It's a drawing app. So I'll show you guys, for example, here's a sketch of my macaron turtle. And as you can see, it's like a very simple sketch. It is not cute at all, but I just want to get like my basic design elements in there. So the sketch does not have to be perfect by any means. You'll probably go back and edit the sketch if anything. But okay, for the pattern that we're going to be designing together, I'm going to say, let's make a bear. And when you first start pattern designing, I definitely recommend sticking to very simple designs, just because it might be hard to think about the more complex animals and shapes and sizes. You probably want to just stick with something really straightforward. So when I think about the different animals to make, I feel like a bear is very straightforward. You have a circle for the head, the ears could be semicircles, the body is a circle, and then the arms and legs are basically cylinders. So again, another circle. And then the tail is a circle. So I feel like that's a good place to start. We also don't need to be doing any color changing. I know some patterns, they have a bunch of color changing throughout to make it appear as if like the plushie has a white belly. Or like for pandas, for example, it has like a black spot around the eye. That's like all incorporated into the pattern. But for this beginner pattern, we're just gonna keep it simple. No color changing. Our bear will just be plain brown. So okay, let's go and do the sketch. Like I said earlier, I'm just thinking in terms of very simple. Oh, of course my iPad is dead. All right, we're going traditional. Let's sketch it out on paper. So like I said earlier, I'm picking a bear because I know it's pretty simple in terms of the shapes that make up the bear. So I'm just gonna quickly do a sketch of what I have in mind. Circle for the head, semicircles for the ears. For simplicity's sake, I think we're just going to embroider the mouth and the nose. It won't have like a snout or anything because that's a little bit more complicated. So we're just gonna keep the bear just a plain circle face. So here is my sketch. As you can see, it's very simple. It's not cute, but we get the idea across. So then once you have your sketch, I like to break it down into each section, and we can start thinking what stitches will help us achieve the shape that we need. So if we start with the head, for example, what stitches will we need to create this circle? Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of amigurumi patterns start out with some combination of stitches into a magic ring. I think for this bear, let's kind of make it a mini bear. We don't want it too big. That way it's easier to design. There's less rounds. I'm thinking we could do like 6 single crochet into a magic ring to start the initial circle of the head. Then we can do some increases. Then we can do some decreases, and I think that will achieve the head. So this kind of gives you a sense of what my thought process looks like when I'm like kind of drafting out the pattern. I'm thinking through all the different stitches I could use to achieve the shapes I need. I really don't think we'll need to do any like half double crochet, double crochet, triple. I think we're just going to be using single crochet, increase and decrease for this pattern. So for the next part, we're actually going to be designing and creating the pattern. I know some people have different preferences for how they go about this. I personally like diving right into it. I don't write down anything ahead of time, whereas some people prefer to sit down and think through each round of the pattern and like create a draft on paper, and then they go and pick up the crochet hook and try to follow along with the draft pattern that they wrote. Whereas I like to just go ahead, get the crochet hook, start doing each round and kind of just go step by step live, and then I'll write down if I like what I'm doing. I will write it down on paper, and that's how the draft pattern will form. I think for beginners, it's easier to do kind of like the just jump into it, because when you're thinking about writing down a pattern and you don't physically see what you're making, I think it's hard to like visualize. So for this video, we're gonna follow my method, but if you prefer to just sit down and draft up the pattern on paper, go ahead. Just wanted to take a quick break from the video to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website platform that will allow you to create beautiful professional websites, engage with your audience, and sell anything online successfully. One of my favorite things about Squarespace is that they have thousands of professional website templates for you to choose from as a starting point, and from there you can really tailor your website exactly how you want it. They also have a really easy drag and drop website builder, so you don't need any coding to change the look of your website. Another great feature about Squarespace is the ability to have an online store. You can sell both digital and physical products, so that's perfect for us crocheters. We can sell our physical plushies and digital patterns all in one place. And then if you sell in person at markets or pop-up events, you could get a Square Reader, and that will allow you to take in-person sales, and all of your inventory will sync across your online store and your in-person sales. Head to squarespace.com for your free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/crochetbyjenna to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much, Squarespace, for sponsoring another video, and with that, let's get back into it. Okay, so I went ahead and grabbed the yarn that I want to use for this bear. I am using Parfait Chunky. This is in the color Teddy Bear. When you design a pattern, you definitely want to keep in mind what kind of yarn you want to use when developing the pattern. If I were to use acrylic yarn, the bear would turn out differently in terms of looks, just because acrylic yarn is very different than chenille. It's always important to document exactly the size yarn that you use, how many yards, and the color and the brand. That way, if people want to recreate the pattern exactly how you made it, they will know what yarn to use. Same thing goes with hook size. We want to think about what hook size we want to use when developing this pattern. My go-to hook size with this yarn is a 5mm hook. So it's just little things like this that go into pattern design before you actually sit down and make the plushie. But all right, I think we're ready to jump into designing this pattern. So I grabbed my 5mm hook, and then I have my yarn. So let's start with the head. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of amigurumi patterns start out with some combination of stitches into a magic ring. I'm gonna just stick with the traditional 6 single crochets into a magic ring. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so this is what our bear is looking like so far. This is round 1. And as we start designing our pattern round by round, make sure you grab some scrap paper or some place where you can jot down everything that you do. That way, when it's time to finalize the pattern and actually go document it online, we have everything written out and it's ready to go. Alright, so for example, here we go. I wrote down we're doing the head. For round 1, we're doing 6 single crochet in a magic ring. Again, usually when I design my patterns, everything is like very like chicken scratch, like it is just thrown onto the page. You don't have to be neat about it. And let me quickly jot down that I'm using 5mm hook with parfait chunky. Okay, cool, got it documented. Okay, for round 2 of the head, right now our circle is pretty small. We only have 6 stitches total in our head so far. So I think I want to follow the traditional amigurumi layout of increasing into the 6 stitches here. So we will double the size of our circle. I'm gonna test that out and see how it looks. We're just gonna go ahead and increase into every single one of those 6 stitches. And this is what the end of round 2 looks like. As you can see, our circle is now double the size and it is looking really good. Let me go ahead and document down what we just did because I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. So we will just be increasing times 6. And I actually forgot to do this last round, but after each round, when designing a crochet pattern, you always should put the amount of stitches you'll have after that round. So for round 1, for example, we did 6 single crochet in a magic ring. We will put in parentheses the number 6 because we should have 6 stitches at the end of that round. So now for round 2, we increased 6 times and we'll have a total of 12 stitches at the end of this round. This is actually a really important step, having the total number of stitches at the end of each round, because that helps others when they go make your pattern to kind of check that they are on track, they're doing the pattern correctly, they have the correct number of stitches. So yes, definitely important to document the amount of stitches at the end of each round. And I actually have gotten some questions in the past from people who were trying to design their own pattern. They're like, oh, hey Jenna, how do I know how many stitches I'll end up with if I put increases into my pattern? So that's actually a really good question that I wanted to bring up now. By doing an increase, you will be adding 1 extra stitch for every increase that you do. So for example, at the end of round 1, we had 6 stitches. I just did 6 increases because we put an increase into every one of those 6 stitches from last round. So that means we added 1 extra stitch 6 times. So that's a total of 6 extra stitches that we put in to round 2. So we went from 6 stitches in round 1 to 12 stitches in round 2 because we put 6 increases into that round. Hopefully that makes sense. Just know whenever you do an increase stitch, you're adding 1 extra stitch to that round. If we only did 1 increase in round 2 instead of 6, we would have had 7 stitches instead of 6 stitches. But since we did 6 increases, we went from 6 stitches to 12 stitches. Okay, so for round 3, I think the circle is still too small where we want to keep increasing, but I don't want to necessarily double the size of the circle. So this is where we will do the staggered increases. And again, this is very common for amigurumi patterns where you do staggered increases going forward to gradually increase the size of your circle. For this one, I think let's just start out with the basics. So we'll do 1 single crochet followed by an increase, and we'll repeat that 6 times. All right, so I just got done doing the 1 single crochet increase sequence, and this is what our bear head is looking like so far. As you can see, we were able to increase the width of our circle, but we didn't do it drastically where it was like double the size. So I will definitely be writing down what we just did because I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. And since we did 1 single crochet increase a total of 6 times, we increased again by 6. So we ended this round with 18 stitches. And then here you go, so you guys can visually see that I'm just documenting everything. And then in case you're wondering why we increased by 6, since we originally increased by 6 in round 2, going forward, if we want to keep increasing proportionally, we'll want to be doing it in multiples of 6. This will ensure that our circle is increasing proportionally. For example, if I were to only repeat this sequence like once or twice, our circle would become uneven. We would have increases in 2 like random spots of our circle, and then everything else would get thrown off. So if you want to maintain that like perfect circle sphere look, it is important to increase proportionally. And then if you're asking why did we increase by 6 in round 2, it's because we started out with 6 single crochet into the magic ring in round 1. So if we did like 5 single crochet into the magic ring in round 1 instead of 6, the second step would be changed. Instead of increasing 6 times, we would only increase 5 times, since that's how many single crochets were in round 1. So hopefully that makes sense and everything's starting to become more like big picture. It's important to know that like every round that you do, it corresponds to the round that you previously did. So even starting with round 1, how we set up round 1 will impact all of our steps going forward. So for our bear head, I did say I wanted to keep this bear kind of like miniature in size. So I think this head is still a little too tiny, but I think if we do 1 more round of increases, using, that will get us to the perfect size for the head. So to maintain the proportions of our circle, instead of doing 1 single crochet increase, I now want to do 2 single crochet increase, and we'll repeat that sequence 6 times. There's no rule saying that you can't do 1 single crochet increase again for round 4, but then it's important to note we wouldn't be increasing by multiples of 6 anymore. Since we ended last round with 18 stitches, we would be increasing a total of 9 times if we were to repeat the 1 single crochet increase sequence all over again. So that's why we're going to do 2 single crochet increase. That will maintain our multiples of 6. I feel like people don't realize, but like quite a bit of math does go into crochet patterns, and it always is helpful to have like a calculator handy, especially for people like me who are bad at, you know, mental math. Sometimes I'll just go onto my calculator app and just do a little quick calculation to make sure we're staying on track, we're keeping in our ratio. So yeah, don't feel bad if you have to have a calculator nearby, just to make sure everything is staying within the ratio. All right, this is the end of round 4, and I think we are finally at a good place to stop increasing because I really like the size of this circle now. Also, my scrunchie matches perfectly. I just realized that. But okay, let me write down what we just did in round 4. So that was a 2 single crochet increase, and we repeated that 6 times. So since we increased a total of 6 times, we do 18 plus 6. So we have 24 stitches at the end of round 4. So once you get your circle to a place where you're like, okay, I do not want it to increase in width, we can go ahead and start increasing in depth and making it deeper. And we'll do this by incorporating multiple rounds of just single crochet. So I think there's a rule of thumb out there, maybe I'm making it up, but when you stop increasing, so for example, we stopped increasing after 2 single crochet increase, to make the circle an appropriate like thickness, you want to do at least 1 more round of single crochet than what you increased. That might sound a little confusing. So since we did 2 single crochet increase, I'll want to do 3 rounds of 24 single crochet to get our circle to the correct like depth. And of course, we'll do this together, but I think for starters, let's do 1 round of 24 single crochet around for round 5. We'll start making our circle a little deeper, and let's see how it looks. All right, I just got done doing 24 single crochet around. This is round 5. And as you can see, our circle is already getting a little deeper. So the head is still pretty incomplete. This is where trial and error comes in. I think I want to do 2 more rounds of 24 single crochet, and then I'll come on and we can see where our circle is at. Keep in mind that we still need to decrease our circle. So right now we're forming the top of the head, but then to form the bottom portion of the head, we'll need to start decreasing. So I don't want to make the head like too tall. So yeah, it's just a lot of trial and error, but okay, I'm just gonna take a guess and I'm gonna try and do 2 more rounds. All right, I just got done round 8, and this is how our head is looking. It is much deeper and it's really looking pretty good in my opinion. I think this is a good stopping point where we can start decreasing, because if we start decreasing, I think it'll add the perfect little curve right there at the bottom. And I think if we add 1 more round of 24 single crochet, the head will just be too long. But of course, this is all personal preference. If you want your bear to have like a longer head, go ahead and add more rounds of 24 single crochet. But I personally am gonna stop here. And for round 9, let's start decreasing. So just like how we increased proportionally in multiples of 6, we're going to start decreasing the same way. So the last step of increasing was 2 single crochet increase. So for our first round of decreasing, we're gonna follow that same pattern. We're gonna do 2 single crochet decrease, and we'll repeat that a total of 6 times. So let me go ahead and do that, and let's see how it turns out before we write anything down. I will say the most common like multiples that I've seen with amigurumi patterns is like the multiples of 6. 6 single crochet in a magic ring, increase by 6, and then so on and so forth. I think if you want a smaller circle to begin with, you could do like 4 single crochet in a magic ring, and then you'll be increasing by multiples of 4. So it all really kind of depends how big you want the circle to be. So that's definitely a good place to start out if you are brand new to pattern design. I feel like multiples of 6 is a pretty safe route to go. But okay, this is the end of round 9. And as you can see, our circle is now getting smaller. We just decreased by 6 stitches. So instead of 24 stitches, we now have 18. And let me go ahead and write that down because I do like how this round turned out. So here we go. Here's how my pattern is looking written. And I forgot to mention earlier, sorry about jumping around in this video. I keep remembering things off the top of my head. So with crochet patterns, there's a lot of abbreviations. So for increases, for example, we like to abbreviate it INC. For decreases, it's usually abbreviated DEC. And we'll talk more about this in section 3, where we go ahead and transfer all of our written pattern onto like a digital format. But we will have a little abbreviation list in the beginning of our pattern. That way, anyone who is picking up your pattern and wanting to make it will know exactly what the abbreviations are. But okay, looking at this head, I think I might want to do one more round of decreasing because the circle is still pretty big. But I am keeping in mind that we do need to make the body still, and we will be sewing this head onto our body. So we don't want to close the circle completely, but I think I do want to make this opening a little smaller to make it look more like a neck. Right now, I feel like if I kept it like this, when we sew our head onto our body, the bear will look like it will have no neck. So let's do one more round of decreasing. So since we did 2 single crochet decrease, for this next round, round 10, which is probably the last round of our head, let's do 1 single crochet decrease. We'll repeat that 6 times, and at the end, we'll have 12 stitches. Because again, we will decrease a total of 6 times, and actually, I don't think I mentioned this, but with decreases, we subtract 1 stitch. So for round 9, for example, we decreased 6 total stitches. So that's why we did 24 minus 6, which gives us a total of 18 stitches. For round 10, we will be doing another 6 decreases. So we'll go from 18 stitches to 12 stitches at the end. All right, I just got done with round 10. This is what our head is looking like. Honestly, I think it looks perfect. It is the perfect little cylinder. If I were to do one more round where I decrease into all of these stitches, we would have only 6 stitches left, and that would be perfect if we wanted to close this circle altogether. But since we don't, we want to attach this to the head. I'm going to keep it just like this, and I think we are at a stopping point now. So I am going to write down the last step of the head that we just did. 1 single crochet, decrease times 6. We have 12 total stitches at the end, and now I think we can go ahead and fasten off. So since we are going to sew this head onto the body, I'm gonna leave a pretty long tail, and this is something that we also need to document in our pattern. That way, when people recreate your pattern, they will know to leave a long tail for sewing. And sometimes people like to be specific. You could say like leave a 6-inch tail, but sometimes people just keep it, you know, general. It's all personal preference. But okay guys, we are done the first part of our bear. Now, since this is the bear's head, we also need to incorporate some eyes and a mouth and a nose, and that's also something that we need to put into our pattern. So my go-to safety eye size is 12 millimeter. I feel like I use 12 millimeter eyes for my minis, for my regulars, and then for jumbo I use, you know, bigger. But I think for this bear, I'm gonna stick with my usual 12 millimeter sized eyes. And this is what they look like. So at this part of the pattern design, I just like to play around, and I will like just stick the eyes in where I think they look best, and I'll kind of just play around and see where I want to put them before I commit to that spot. So right now I put them like here. This is cute, but then again, we still need to add like a nose and mouth, so maybe I need to like put them up a little. And then you gotta like figure out the spacing. Some people like the eyes close together, others like them far apart. Do whatever you prefer. All right, so I think this is what I'm going to stick with. It's cute, and then we could just embroider a little nose and a mouth, and I just can envision like the 2 little ears. It'll be cute. I'm gonna go ahead and put the backings into the eyes, and there we go. So it's important to note that if we were going to close the circle completely, we would want to write into the pattern a few rounds beforehand that you need to stop here and place the eyes, because otherwise in the later rounds it might be a little too difficult for people to go in and place the eyes. With this head specifically though, we have a pretty big opening at the end, so people can just place the eyes after they're done making the head, but that's not always the case, so I didn't want to call that out. But then if we go back to our pattern notes, I will say exactly where I placed my eyes, how far apart, and like between what rounds. That way people, if they want to recreate my specific bear exactly, they will know where to put the eyes and how far apart. So if you look at the top of your bear, you will see each round that we did, and that is how we can find out where specifically we put the eyes. So we have round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. Okay, and it looks like we put our eyes between round 5 and round 6. So I will go ahead, grab my paper. I'm gonna say place eyes between round 5 and round 6. And then we can go ahead and count how many stitches apart we placed the eyes. So here we go. So here's 1 stitch, 2 stitch, 3 stitch, 4 stitch. So it looks like we placed the eyes between round 5 and 6 and then around 4 stitches apart. And of course, when people go ahead and recreate your pattern, they are free to place the eyes wherever, but at least you will let them know where you put the eyes. And then I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to like embroider a nose and mouth on, so you can also note that in your pattern notes. I also know sometimes people like to add blush to their plushies. I do it all the time, so I'll also include a note saying like, oh, add blush under eyes, if preferred. For this bear, I'm not going to, so I won't note that down. So off camera, I just got some scrap black yarn and I went ahead and embroidered a nose and a little mouth. So now I think we are ready to stuff the head. And like I mentioned earlier, if we were going to close this circle completely, we would want to mention stuffing it prior to finishing up the pattern. But since we're leaving the head open, since we're gonna sew it onto our bear's body, I'm going to save stuffing to the very end. So now after we place the eyes, we embroidered the mouth and the nose, I will leave another note saying stuff the head. And in section 3, we will go over the material section of our pattern, but this is essentially where we will list out everything that someone will need to recreate the pattern, and stuffing will definitely go on there, and what kind of stuffing, but I went ahead and just stuffed the head. Oh, it's looking so cute. It's just like a little head. Okay, so I think we are ready to move on. We can set this head aside for later when we're ready to sew everything together. I think next, let's make the 2 ears. When I think of ears, if we like refer back to our drawing, you can really think of ears as 2 little circles. You could also think of it as 2 semicircles. So with that being said, we want the circles to be small. We don't want it to be as big as the head because bear ears are small in general. So when we think about designing the ears, let's not start out the same way that we did with the head. With the head, we did 6 single crochet into a magic ring. With the ears, since we want them to be smaller in general, let's do 4 single crochet into a magic ring. And if we don't like it, we don't like it, and we can start over and try something else. But I think for round 1, 4 single crochet into a magic ring would be a good place to start. So let me go ahead and grab my brown yarn and let's do that. All right, this is what it's looking like so far. This is the end of round 1, very small little circle. For round 2, I say let's double the size of the circle. So we'll do 4 increases. So very similar to the head, we will be placing an increase into each one of the stitches. So at the end of round 2, we will have 8 stitches. Okay. I'd say honestly, this is a good size. Like if you go ahead and grab your head and you like kind of compare the sizes together, I don't think we'd want to go any bigger than this. So we're not going to increase anymore. I think I just want to increase the depth of our circle now. So I will be doing maybe 2 rounds of 8 single crochet. So let me write that down. Okay, so I actually just got done round 3. So I just did 8 single crochet a round, and this is how our ear is looking so far. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with how this looks. If I were to fold this in half to create that like semicircle, this is what it looks like. And I feel like this is fine. Like I don't think we need to do 1 more round. I think 1 more round would honestly make the ears too long. So then you can go ahead and kind of like mock it up, grab your bear. And yeah, it looks really cute the way it is right now. So scratch what I said earlier. And this is kind of where the trial and error part comes in. Always like assess how your work looks at the end of each round so you can determine, you know, kind of what the next step should be. So I originally wrote round 3 and 4, but now I'm going to just scratch that out and we're just going to do round 3. So I think this is where we stop for our ears. It's super simple. I love doing ears because it's usually super simple like this. Like you don't need to do a lot of rounds. Now we'll actually need to make 2 ears. So I will go back to my pattern that I'm writing down and I'll make sure to note to make 2. And I will quickly do that off camera. But I think after that, we are good to start moving on to the body. Okay, now for the body. I'm going to dedicate a whole new page to write out what we want for the body. So if we refer back to our sketch, The body is simply just one big circle. Now, in terms of sizing, the body will be bigger than our head. So this is where we can use some intuition. If we look back at the pattern for the head, we went up to 2 single crochet increase, and then we stopped increasing, made the head longer, and then decreased. So then for the body, we know we want it to be bigger than the head. So based off of the head's pattern, I think we will need to go up to 4 single crochet increase. Because ideally, if I look at my sketch, I want the body to kind of be twice as big as the head. And again, this is just me guessing, but it's all part of pattern design. Sometimes there's some shortcuts though, like definitely use intuition and refer back to pieces that you already made when you're trying to think about sizing and proportions. So let's test that out. So for the body, we can borrow a lot of what we already did for the head. We'll start out with 6 single crochet in a magic ring. We'll increase 6 times. We'll do 1 single crochet increase, 2 single crochet increase, 3 single crochet increase, 4 single crochet increase, and then we'll stop. And then from there, we can decide whether or not we want to make the body even wider, or we can begin to make it taller and deeper. All right, so I just got done round 5, and this is what 3 single crochet increase looks like. So this is 1 extra round of increases versus what we did for the head. So let me go ahead and grab the head. So as you can see, this circle is now 6 stitches bigger than this one for the head. And honestly, I'm not sure if I want to go up to 4 single crochet increase. I think this is pretty good for right now. I know in my drawing, I had the body kind of like twice as big as the head and like a bit like wider. But seeing this circle worked up now, I think this is like the perfect width for the bear's body. And again, this is where trial and error comes into play. I'm not sure if this will look good, but just like eyeballing it, I think it will. So I'm going to say, let's not do 4 single crochet increase. I'm gonna cross that out. So we'll stop increasing here, and now we can do a few rounds of 30 single crochet because that's how many stitches we end up with after doing 3 single crochet increase. And let's do a few rounds of 30 single crochet to make the body bigger. For the head, I know we did 3 rounds. For the body, maybe let's do 4, and I'll come back on and show you guys how the body's looking. All right, I just got done doing the 4 rounds of 30 single crochet, and this is how our body is looking so far. Honestly, it is looking great. I think 4 rounds is perfect because I don't want the body to be too long. And I think if we start decreasing at this point, it will make the cutest little circular body. Let me grab my head to give some perspective. Yeah, I think it'll look really cute if we start decreasing. So if I look back at our pattern so far, we did up to 3 single crochet increase. So now when we want to decrease, we'll do 3 single crochet decrease 6 times, and that will bring us from 30 single crochet back to 24. Also, sorry, my notes are so messy, but this is honestly realistically how it looks when I am pattern designing. I'm just like jotting everything on here. Not neat, not cute, just getting it down on paper so I don't forget. And it's important to note, since we are going to be sewing the body and the head together, I want to look back at our head pattern and I want to see how many stitches we had on the last round. And it looks like the last round of the head had 12 stitches, and that's where we stopped. So when we're designing the body, I will also know in my mind, okay, I need to have at least 12 stitches at the end of this pattern. That way we'll have the exact amount of stitches for the head and the body so we can perfectly align it and sew them together. So with that logic, I can also kind of plan a few rounds ahead. So for round 11, we'll do 2 single crochet followed by a decrease 6 times, and that will bring us to 18 stitches. And then lastly for round 12, we'll do 1 single crochet decrease. We'll repeat that 6 times, and that will bring us to our 12 stitches that we can end the body on. And as you can see, I just planned it all out right down here. We'll end on 12 stitches, and that's perfect because that is how many stitches we have in the head. So let me go ahead and finish the body real quick with what we just mapped out. Okay, so I just finished doing the last round of the body. As you can see, this is how our little body is looking, super cute. And at the top here, we have 12 remaining stitches. And then let me grab the head. Oh, look at it. The bear is so round. I love it. Okay, The last step for the body will be to fasten off. We don't need to leave a long tail since we already left a long tail on the head, and that's what we will use to sew everything together. So we can just say fasten off, leave a short tail, and then just stuff the body generously. All right, here is the finished stuffed body, and then here is our head, and this is what it will look like. I love that it's so round. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we are done the body, we are done the 2 ears, and we are done the head. If we look back at our sketch, it's really starting to come together. I think for timing's sake though, I'm going to stop here. Like, I don't think I will design the arms and the legs and the tail with you guys just because this video is already becoming pretty lengthy. But just keep in mind, the same rationale will apply if you want to go on and create the arms and legs for the bear. Just feel free to play around with it, but for this video's sake, I'm going to stop here and we will move on to assembling our plushie. So usually when you're done creating all the different parts of the plushie, the last section of almost every pattern is the assembly portion, and that is where the pattern designer will walk you through exactly how to put your plushie together. So that is what we're going to work on right now. I'm going to go to a blank page again. For our bear, since I'm not doing the arms and legs and tail, we only have 3 pieces. We have the head, the ears, and the body. So let me go ahead and grab all of our pieces. So let's start by sewing the ears onto the head. I'm gonna take my head, and usually I just like playing around with the placement. I'll try to find the perfect spot for each ear to make it look as cute as possible. If we do the ears slightly spaced out, this is honestly giving me like cat vibes. But then if we space out the ears even more, there we go. This is looking more like a bear. Okay, so I just got done sewing the 1 ear. And it's important to note that I did not stuff the ear, so I will want to call that out in my pattern. And then in terms of placement, it looks like if we look at the top of our bear, it looks like I placed the ear between rounds 1, 2, 3. So between rounds 2 and 3 is where I liked to place my ears. So I will also jot that down. And then let me go ahead and sew on the 2nd ear. Okay, so I just got done sewing the 2nd ear on. And it's looking pretty cute, guys. It looks like a bear. I know usually the bears have like the snout popping out, but for simplicity's sake, and since this is a very beginner pattern, we are just making the head flat. But in the future, if we wanted to refine this pattern, we could definitely add in some color changes. We could make the snout area a different color. You can really get fancy with it. And then the last part of assembly for this pattern will be sewing the head onto the body. So the language I usually like to use for sewing a head onto a body, I'll say align the 12 stitches of the head with the 12 stitches of the body, and then using the long tail from the head, take your sewing needle and sew the head onto the body and then weave in any ends. I feel like that language is pretty standard across all of the amigurumi patterns that I personally have used. It also helps to include a ton of pictures. So for example, for the step where we sewed on the ears, I would take a picture of the top of the head so people could see exactly where I placed the ears and then maybe the side. But okay, let's go ahead and sew on the head to the body. Okay, here is the finished bear. I'm kind of cracking up, you guys. This is a big part of pattern design. Like once you put everything together, sometimes you just don't like it. It didn't turn out the way you wanted. I think the head is cute, but the body, in my opinion, it's just way too round. It kind of looks like a bear snowman. Like, it's giving me snowman vibes. So realistically, if this was a pattern that I wanted to release and put out into the world, I personally would want to remake this. I would have to do a lot more refining before I would feel comfortable releasing this pattern for even testing. But, you know, pattern design is definitely a bunch of trial and error. Like I said, there will be multiple iterations. I actually just shared the other day on my story. I'll insert a picture here. I tried to create this frog pattern and it was just not turning out the way I wanted. I had like 3 different attempts. I still don't even know if I'm happy with attempt 3. So again, it's just back to the drawing board, back to square one, and just slightly tweaking little parts of the design until it turns out exactly how you want it. So pattern design is definitely a challenge, but it's worth it because it is so satisfying when you finally reach that point in the pattern where it turns out exactly how you wanted and you're like, yes, I made it, I did it. It was worth all of that trial and error. For the sake of this video, we will keep Mr. Snowman Bear the way he is, but just know realistically, there would be so many more attempts at this, so many remakes, and a lot more refining. But let's go ahead and jump into section 3. All right, so section 3, this is where we will officially document our pattern online, and we will get it ready for the draft version that we'll send out to pattern testers. So I'm gonna switch to voiceover, Jenna, and I will walk you guys through my process of what it looks like when I typically lay out my patterns online and what software I use. All right, so people always ask me what software I use to write up my patterns, and honestly, I love using Google Docs. I think it is super easy. It's easy to share the document with people and work live together on edits, and I just love having everything on my Google Drive. I'm a huge Google Drive girly. So that's personally why I choose Google Docs for my pattern making, but I know a lot of people also love using Canva. I will say Canva is way more aesthetic, so if you want your patterns to look really cute, I recommend Canva, but for practicality, I love using Google Docs. But anyway, okay, so here is how I usually start out all of my patterns. I like to have the file name as the pattern itself, draft, and then I always like to have the date at the end. This helps me keep track with version control. Usually with patterns, I have multiple different iterations of them, so I will always change the date at the end so I know what pattern is the most up to date. I decided to call this pattern Snowman Bear because it does look like a snowman in bear form. So we're going with that name. And for all of my patterns, I like to have a cover page. So this will simply just have the pattern name, and then it will have by Crochet by Jenna, and I will also put here, please tag and credit me in your finished work on Instagram if you choose to share. And then I will always include a finished picture of the pattern. So right here, I included a picture of the snowman bear. I do recommend taking all of your pictures outside with natural lighting. It really helps it look professional. I do get a lot of questions on how to take pictures for, you know, product shots and pattern shots. So I think I will save that for a totally different video because I can go really into depth with all my like photo strategies. But for right now, we're just gonna focus on, you know, writing the pattern and everything. So that is page 1. And then for page 2, this is where I will always start out with the materials needed to make this pattern. We'll start out by having the yarn, what size yarn, what color, what brand, and how much you'll need. So for this snowman bear, I said we're going to be using Premier Parfait Chunky, which is a size 6 yarn in the color Teddy Bear. I said 1/2 skein, which is around 65 yards, will be more than enough. So I let people know they don't need the entire skein. And then I also mentioned that you can use whatever yarn you want to recreate this snowman bear, but I personally love Parfait Chunky. Then I also mentioned we need 2 12mm safety eyes, some scrap black yarn for the nose and mouth, some polyester fiber fill, stitch markers, and then I will be using a 5mm hook. I recommend that others use a 5mm hook, but then I do mention here that you can use whatever size hook you want to change up the size of your bear. And then lastly, you'll need a yarn needle for like closing and sewing, and then I'll always list out the finished measurements. So I said here the finished snowman bear measurements using a 5mm hook and Premier Parfait Chunky yarn are 3.5 inches wide by 5 inches tall, and this just helps give people an idea of how big the finished plushie will look. This is super helpful. I always refer to these measurements when I'm making a pattern from other designers, so I always make sure I include it in my own patterns as well. All right, next we have the abbreviation section. I mentioned this earlier, but in almost every pattern you'll see out there will be abbreviations throughout. So this is where people will get to see what those abbreviations mean. For this pattern, it is super simple. We only have 4 different abbreviations. MR is magic ring, R is round, increase is INC, and decrease is DEC. For other more complex patterns, you will have a longer list for sure, but it's always important to list out all your abbreviations because sometimes in the past I did forget 1 or 2 and then people ask you, hey, what does this mean? So you always want to cater your patterns to absolute beginners and really spell everything out clearly. And then lastly, I have a notes section in all of my patterns. This is optional, but I think it's really helpful. I like to reiterate here that the pattern was created by me, Crochet by Jenna. I also include my my Instagram handle. And then I also include to please credit me as the pattern creator if you do post on social media with your bear, and then also feel free to tag me because I would love to see it. And then lastly, I include this little terms of use bullet, and it basically says like, please do not copy or redistribute any part of this pattern as your own. You may sell the finished products, but please reference me as the pattern creator. This is a super important disclaimer. A lot of questions that I get on Etsy is, oh hey, I like purchased your pattern, am I allowed to sell the finished plushies? Yes, you totally are fine to do that as long as I'm credited as the pattern designer and that you don't resell the pattern. That is a huge problem right now in the crochet community. There are so many people like buying other people's patterns, downloading the files and reselling it on their own website. Like, that is just messed up. Do not do that. Okay, so after those like admin sections, we jump right into the pattern. I usually like to go in order in terms of what part should be made first. So for the bear, for example, we are doing the head first. So I listed the head first in this document. And then I said in teddy bear, so you always want to call out what color that you want people to use when starting the pattern. We don't do any color changes in this pattern in general, so that makes it really easy, but I still make sure to specify in teddy bear, this is what we will be doing with that color. And then I simply just went ahead and wrote everything out that we had copied directly in our notes. And I actually came across an error when I was jotting things down. I said rounds 5 through 8 are 24 single crochet, and that's a total of 4 rounds, but I know when we were creating it together, it was only 3. So by writing the pattern down and then like copying it over digitally, it's kind of like a way of proofreading your own work. I'm like, oh wait, that was a mistake, let me fix it. Typically people like to abbreviate round by just using R and then followed by the number for that round. And then if you are doing a sequence, like for example in round 3 we're doing 1 single crochet increase 6 times, we like to include it in brackets. And then like I mentioned earlier, at the very end in parentheses, you will always have how many stitches people should have at the end of each round. And then for the head, for example, at the very end, all that people need to do are fasten off and leave a long tail for sewing. I actually didn't write out the instructions for the eyes and the mouth, so let me do that with you guys together. So we'll say place safety eyes between round 5 and round 6. Around 4 stitches apart. And then I'll add another bullet for the nose and mouth. Embroider the small nose and mouth with the scrap black yarn if desired. And then one more note, I will say stuff the head generously. Okay, there we go. So I think this portion of our pattern is done, and now I'm going to repeat the same thing basically for the rest of the pieces. So for the ears, let's go ahead. I just copied some language from above because I know it will start out similarly. So ears, and then let's make sure to note down to make 2. In teddy bear, so the same color. Let's refer back to our notes. We actually are going to do 4 single crochet and a magic ring. So we'll have 4 stitches total at the end of round 1. For round 2, we're going to be doing increase times 4, and that will result in 8 stitches total at the end of round 2. And then round 3, this is the last round of the ear, we'll just do 8 single crochet and we'll have 8 stitches at the end. And then finally we'll say fasten off and leave a long tail for sewing. Perfect. So that is the end of the ear section. And then for the body, let's take some of these steps from the head because I know it's pretty much the same up until a certain point. So this will now be the body. In teddy bears, same, all of these are the same. And then starting in round 5, we want to do 3 single crochet increase times 6. So then that is a total of 30. Whoop, not 300. And then for round 6 through round 9, so that's 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's 4 rounds total. We will be doing 30 single crochet. So I'll write it out like that. And then we'll start decreasing in round 10. So 3 SC decrease times 6. This is going to be 24. Round 11 is 2 single crochet decrease times 6. That is now going to be 18. And then round 12 is the last round, and we're going to be doing 1 single crochet decrease times 6, and that is going to be 12. And then I'm going to go ahead and take that same language, now fasten off, leave it long tail for sewing, stuff the body generously. All right, and now that we're done writing out the patterns for each part of the snow bear, we will go ahead and now add a assembly portion. So assembly. And then we can go ahead and refer back to our notes that we wrote down earlier. I'm gonna take a look at what we said. So I'm gonna say, take one ear and align it with and then align it between R2 and R3 of the snowman bear's head, and using the ear's tail, sew the ear securely to the head. I like to align it around 2 stitches apart from the eye, and I'm gonna say repeat with the second ear. And then for the head and the body, I'm gonna say take the head and align the 12 stitches with the 12 stitches of the body, using the long tail from the head, sew the head securely onto the body. And now obviously with our snowman bear, we do not have any arms and legs, but if we did, I would add in some language about how to attach the arms and legs and tails, etc. So once you're done the assembly part, I then like to just say like, oh, congrats, you finished the snowman bear and you can enjoy it and all of its cuteness. And I'll include another picture here. I didn't include any pictures in the pattern itself for this pattern example, but usually I will have some like progress step-by-step pictures in some of my more complex patterns. So definitely don't be scared to include some pictures throughout. It will actually be super beneficial and people will find it really helpful. But for this example, I'm not. Okay, and that's honestly how I format all of my patterns. Once you finish, this is considered maybe like your first draft, and I would just run a quick like spell check. I would make sure all the grammar and everything looks good. And then once that's set and you feel pretty comfortable with it, it's ready for pattern testing, and that will lead us into section 4. All right, so section 4, we're almost done with our pattern. We've finished the draft and it is ready to be tested. Now, pattern testing, for those of you who are new to crochet or never heard of it, this is where you share your draft pattern with some crocheters in the crochet community. It could be friends, it could be strangers, whoever you want, and you can ask them to test your pattern, and that way you get some fresh eyes on your pattern. You've probably been staring at this pattern for way too long at this point to like notice anything wrong, so that's why it's important to get other people to test the pattern out, because they've never seen it, it's fresh eyes, and they can give you some honest feedback. The most popular way for people to like run pattern tests is through Instagram. That's where I've seen a majority of the pattern tests go down. Usually it's called a tester call. So for example, if I wanted you guys to test out my new snowman bear pattern, I would like take a picture of the snowman bear. I would post on Instagram and be like, tester call, I'm looking for 3 to 4 people to test my new pattern. I'm looking for them to give me feedback. Please give me feedback by March 1st. And then I'll also say like, oh, comment down below if you're interested. Some people will say like, tag 3 friends, like and share this post, etc. You can do it however you want. So then fast forward, you'll get some comments. People will be interested in testing. You can select the people that you want. And then from there, you will email them your pattern and wait for their feedback. Pattern testing is so important because like 9 times out of 10, your testers will catch mistakes that you missed just because, again, you've been staring at this pattern for so long, you're kind of blind to your mistakes. They'll offer you super helpful feedback, they'll critique your pattern, they could offer you improvements, and it's just great to get other people's opinions and feedback on it. So once you gather all this feedback from your testers, you'll want to incorporate the feedback into your pattern itself. So you'll go back to your Google Doc, you'll go back to Canva, you'll update the pattern based off of what the testers said. For example, for my snowman bear, maybe my testers thought the instructions weren't clear enough for the assembly. So I would go back and try to update the blurb about how to assemble your bear, try and improve it. Maybe my tester suggested that I have some like step-by-step photos. I'll go back and include them into my pattern. It's just a lot of back and forth, a lot of rework, but it's honestly for the best because this will lead to less questions later on and a more successful pattern release. So once you're done incorporating everything from your testers, the tester call is over, everybody has made it and completed it, you are now ready to launch your pattern. Now, some people have asked me, like, is there a strategic way to like launch your pattern? Should I wait a certain amount of time, etc.? And honestly, not really. Like, it's all up to personal preference. I know sometimes people like to build anticipation and say like, hey, I'm gonna release this pattern on March 1st, and they'll keep advertising that the pattern will come out on March 1st 2 weeks in advance, and that way people are like, oh wow, I can't wait for March 1st, I can't wait to get this pattern, I can't wait for it to get released. It kind of builds some like hype around it. And then other times people are like, you know what, hey, I just finished my pattern testing, my pattern's ready, it's released, here it is. It's honestly all personal preference. There's no right or wrong way. It just comes down to how you want to present your finalized pattern. But I'd say once your pattern testers are done testing and you've incorporated everything, you've got the green light to go ahead and release your pattern. And when you go ahead and release your pattern, the logistics behind it, it will all depend on what selling platform you are releasing it on. Sorry, my camera died, but back to what I was saying. So if you are releasing your pattern on Etsy, people have asked me like, how do I sell like a digital product on Etsy? All you need to do is go to your listing section, and when you create a new listing, you will want to mark that this is a digital product. That will automatically prompt Etsy to ask you to upload a file, and that is how you will create your pattern listing. I also like to add the extra step where I will make people put in a little comment box that they understand that this is a digital pattern that they are buying. It is not a physical product, because there is a lot of confusion. Sometimes people will think they're buying a physical plushie, but in reality it's just the PDF digital download. So I like to include that little comment box that will kind of force people to say, yes, I understand that this is a pattern. And you can add this by going down on your listing on Etsy, and you can say that you want the personalization section on, and that is where you can add the little blurb of like, hey, say yes in this box if you understand this is a pattern. And then if you're selling on a different platform, I really can't expand on that because I have only really sold on Etsy, but I assume it's kind of similar to Etsy where you can just mark that it's a digital product and upload the file from there. And I always like to export my patterns from Google Docs as a PDF. I think it's the cleanest way versus exporting it as like a Word document. But again, it's just personal preference. It's whatever you prefer, but that's just how I do it. But oh my gosh, okay, I think that is the end of this video. Hopefully this is helpful to anybody who has been wanting to start designing patterns and kind of get into the crochet pattern designing space. It is definitely a skill where it takes time and practice, and even to this day, like, I still struggle with pattern design myself. I frog things all the time. I'm not happy with how the pattern turned out. Like, it is just a constant process of trial and error and just redoing things. So definitely stay patient with it and have fun. At the end of the day, hopefully you will be able to come up with a pattern that you are happy with, but if not, you can always just continue refining it and changing it and really getting it to a place where you're happy with it. The ball is in your court. You can always change it up if you're not happy with it. If you guys are interested, maybe I'll come out with a second part to this video and we'll go into more complex patterns, but I thought it would be really helpful if we just started from like level 1, absolute beginner level. But yeah, let me know in the comments below. But all right, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you guys in my next one. Bye.